Hello students, this is revision of the essay on national cultures by Franz Fanon. This chapter was a speech given by Franz Fanon to the Second Congress of Black Artists and Writers in Rome in the year 1959. To an international group of artists and writers, Fanon laid out reasons why an international black culture is not viable. He ultimately believes only struggle for nationhood can form the basis of culture. Frantz Fanon, as we know, was a French West Indian psychiatrist and political philosopher from the French colony of Martinique. His works have become influential in the fields of post colonial studies, critical theory, and Marxism. In his works, Fanon discusses the psychopathology of colonization and the human, social, and cultural consequences of decolonization. Fanon wrote four books: Black Skin, White Mask, Studies in a Dying Colonialism Toward the African Revolution, and The Wretched of the Earth. These books have long standing impact and is widely discussed even today. Fanon starts the essay by discussing the way the native intellectual reacts to colonialism. Colonialism does not just hold a people in its grip, it also turns to the past of the oppressed people and distorts, disfigures, and destroys it. In turn, native intellectuals research the past and find proof of a rich and glorious history. But in doing so, the native intellectual recover the past of Africa or of black people all over the world. Such efforts include the 20th century literary movement known as Negritude. The Negritude movement sought to create a literature separate from European culture with its own values drawn from black life and culture. Fanon is sympathetic to these efforts. He values the cultural sphere, saying the efforts of native intellectuals are not a luxury but a necessity. But ultimately, he finds limitations in negritude and other attempts to define a global black culture. He says the problems confronting black American writers like Richard Wright and Langston Hughes are different from those of someone like Leopold Senghor. The United States and Senegal are historically distinct and they have different national cultures. Fanon rejects negritude and similar efforts because they accept the colonial worldview. Negritude accepts colonial division and turns the hierarchy upside down. Also, native intellectuals are drawn to the idea of a universal black culture because they learn to value universalism in their European focused education. The native intellectual will try to make European culture his own. Fanon sees becoming a Europhile native intellectual as attractive but doomed. In his works, Fanon appeals that the blacks should overcome the sense of alienation. He stresses that black men and women must shake off the psychological colonization that racist phenomenology imposes. In the first phase of national struggle, colonialism tries to disarm national demands by putting forward economic doctrines. As soon as the first demands are set out, colonialism pretends to consider them and recognize that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment. It will open up some work for the unemployed so that the national consciousness gets delayed by a few years. But soon colonialism will realize that it is incapable of satisfying the economic and social aspirations of the colonized people. When colonialism understands that its social reform tactics yields no results, it will resort to establishment of a regime of terror by employing police troops. According to Fanon, rather than imitating European culture or promoting a global black culture, native intellectuals must realize that their culture is national. Poetry will not free the nation. He also believes that a national culture cannot give birth to nation. The struggle to free the nation creates national culture. To fight for a national culture means to fight for liberation of a nation. It is not enough to delve into the past in order to find coherent elements to counteract colonialism's attempts to falsify and harm. We must work and fight to construct future and prepare ground for the vigorous shoots that are already springing up. National culture is not just folklore nor an abstract populism. It is the whole body of efforts made by people in the sphere of thought to describe, justify, and praise the actions through which that people has created itself and keeps in existence. There is an interlink between the struggle for liberation and culture. When national consciousness develops, culture immediately comes into being.